Hi, my name is Isaac Wilson, and this is my presentation for the effectiveness of diversity training programs in the workplace. In this new era of social justice reform, the financial sector of the country has begun changing their mindset to include more diversity training and affirmative action programs, where previously the sector has been dominated by white men with the sole mindset of making money. This change in motivation has been very visible in our country, but the results have been inconclusive. I'm going to focus on two articles by Harvard Business Review that regard the effectiveness of diversity programs. Although they are from the same publisher, I do believe these sources can be categorized as different, because they are written by entirely different people and seem to come to entirely different conclusions. The first article, titled, "Does Diversity Training Work the Way It's Supposed to?" was written by Edward H. Chang, Catherine L. Milkman, Laura J. Zero, Cassandra Braybaugh, Dana M. Grommet, Reb Rebel, Cade Massey, Angela L. Duckworth, and Adam Grant. They posit that Fortune 500 companies are all investing in diversity training programs, while very few have measured their actual effectiveness. The authors have decided to create their own experiment that would calculate the effectiveness of diversity training, their goal being to measure employees' attitudes towards women and racial minorities. They created 3 versions of a 1-hour-long online training course, the first focusing on gender bias, the second on all bias, racial, gender, age, sexual orientation, etc., and the third on the importance of psychological safety to act as a control group. Each group contained more than 3,000 employees from global organizations, and the final sample was 61.5% male, 38.5% female, included employees located in 63 different countries, and about 25% of them were managers. Members of the biased-focused training were more likely to acknowledge discrimination against women and support policies designed to help and acknowledge racial and gender disparities, which compared similarly to the control group. The training affected behavioral change in only female employees, but not so much white male employees. 3 weeks after the training, employees were asked to nominate up to 5 coworkers that they would like to meet for casual coffee chat to help create a more inclusive culture. The only conclusive result was that junior women who participated in the bias training were more willing to nominate senior women in an attempt to seek out mentorship. Apparently, the training motivated women to seek advancement, with no change in behavior among any other racial groups or genders. With this data, you can see that the actual impact of diversity training is very minimal, and does not improve employees' attitudes towards women and racial minorities. What it does accomplish is strengthening relationships among already established groups, as seen with the women. It does not foster more cooperation between blacks and whites or men and women. The next article I'm going to talk about explores the more obvious motivations of big corporate companies, as Fortune 500 companies are hardly known for being pioneers of social progressivism. This article, entitled "Why Diversity Programs Fail," written by Frank Dobbin and Alexandra Kalev, states that diversity programs, which unsurprisingly are only concerned with protecting the company from lawsuits, actually make bias worse in the workplace. Quote, "Try to coerce me to do X, Y, or Z, and I'll do the opposite just to prove that I'm my own person." End quote. Through analyzing 3 decades worth of data from more than 800 U.S. firms and interviewing hundreds of line managers and executives, the authors have come to the conclusion that many of the pro-diversity programs have been forced into place with the perceived goal of encouraging the hiring of a more diverse employee base, including diversity training, hiring tests, performance ratings, grievance procedures, actually produce the opposite intended effect. With the use of performance ratings, quote, "There's no effect on minority managers over the next 5 years, and the share of white women in management drops by 4% on average." End quote. Grievance procedures encourage retaliation by managers, hiring tests encourage nepotism, and forced diversity training sparks more bias and backlash. While these systems seem to be failing spectacularly, according to the article, voluntary training evokes much more positive results. When managers and executives are invited to participate in discussions on diversity, they are much more willing to cooperate, as the ones that attend see themselves as champions of diversity. Self-managed teams of coworkers increase contact among diverse types of people, because they are acting as equals in pursuit of a common goal. Social accountability, where employers, superiors, and peers are made aware of rates of raises and hiring patterns by race and gender, encourage managers to take into account the social repercussions of acting racist or sexist and discourage it. These two articles seem to come to two entirely different conclusions at first, but once you realize that the first experiment was made up entirely of voluntary participants, it is easier to see that they agree with each other without realizing it. The first experiment suffers from survivorship bias, where their conclusions on the effectiveness of diversity training programs as a whole are determined entirely by people who want to participate in them. Clearly, mandatory diversity training is not as productive as many seem to think it is. Nevertheless, the second article states that nearly half of mid-sized companies use mandatory diversity training, and nearly all Fortune 500 companies do. So why is this? What it ultimately comes down to is motivation, and this conclusion needs no peer-reviewed research to support it. Companies are motivated by one thing: money. Public reputation of any company determines a large percentage of its stock value on the market, and high-profile class action lawsuits against Fortune 500 companies concerning race, gender, or sexual orientation discrimination are eaten up by the media, which is why we see Wall Street firms requiring new hires to sign arbitration contracts, agreeing not to join class actions. It is in the best interests of any company to play along with the social trends of the times and to encourage practices that protect them from lawsuits. That is precisely the problem, though. These companies only have to look like they're affecting change. There's no incentive for them to actually improve employees' attitudes towards women and racial minorities, which is why we see most of them using ineffective, counterproductive modes of encouraging diversity. Capitalism, like most economic and political systems, treats people as a means to an end, the end being money. The only way to accomplish the goals we have set out for ourselves is to reveal the monetary benefits of encouraging diversity and work within the system. Thank you. This is my bibliography. Thanks for watching.